9,268 meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations in maintaining international peace and security, European Union. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite His Excellency Mr. Josep Borrell, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Josep Borrell.
Security Council, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, this is my third briefing as EU High Representative, but it is the first time that I am able to join you in person. And every time I participated in my briefings, I warned about a deficit in multilateralism. And I have described this and how a rise in power politics has led to more distrust, to more point scoring, more vetoes, including here at the Security Council. More vetoes and less agreements. And that the price was being paid in terms of problems not solved, conflicts that fester, and people left at the mercy of events. And I fear that the situation this year is even worse and will become worse. The United Nations and the multilateral system are under threat like they have never been before. Early this month, Secretary General sounded the alarm bell, and he was right on doing so. Secretary General warned that time is running out for the world to avoid meltdown. He called on everyone to act decisively before it's too late. And indeed, we are facing a global emergency. We see a proliferation of conflicts, climate crisis, systematic attacks on democracy and human rights, and ever deeper global inequalities. The problems are mounting, and our collective capacity to find solutions is declining. And this will, if the problems are mounting and the capacity to solve them is decreasing, certainly we are facing to a bigger crisis, and we cannot afford it. The proposal of the Secretary General in our common agenda has the potential to deliver the reforms that the world needs at the summit of the future. But this will only happen if we, all of us, invest in revitalizing the multilateral system. It will not just happen by itself, sitting in our position and expecting others to do the job. No, it will not happen if countries stick to narrow nationalistic agendas. The European Union is trying to do its part. We do our part. we have always been a strong supporter investing in the United Nations, both politically and financially. Allow me to say that the European Union and its member states are the largest collective contributor to the United Nations budget. We have always backed the three pillars of the United Nations: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. What a beautiful set of words. Peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. And we know that each depend on the other two for success. They are not isolated objectives. They are extraordinarily interlinked. Peace and security is a precondition for sustainable development, but without sustainable development, we will not have peace and security, and without both of them, we are not going to have human rights. And that's why we need to address all security threats, new and old, in a holistic approach. But equally, that's why we must counter the worsening human rights situation we see in many countries. We remain committed to all human rights, individuals and collective, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Especially this year. This year, as you know, it's the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Universal. Universal means that human rights doesn't belong to any specific culture. They are universal. And it's a good moment also to recall that human rights are not only universal, but indivisible, that they apply to everyone and everywhere. In the same way, I think that we need to renew our commitment to the Sustainable Development Agenda, precisely because we see global inequalities rising, and the Sustainable Development Goals Summit later this year will be a crucial moment to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And as a sign of our commitment, the European Union will submit in July its voluntary review of the SDGs at the high-level political forum. This will be an opportunity to share with the broader United Nations membership our efforts to support the achievement of the SDGs at home and around the world. And also to point the challenges that, as we see them. So let me summarize how do we see them. First, there is 1 year of war against Ukraine, plus global consequences. As I said yesterday at the General Assembly, this war was and remains a clear case of aggression in breach of the United Nations Charter. And it's not an European issue. It's not about the West versus Russia. It's about the kind of world in which we want to live. A world where no one will be safe and where the illegal use of force would somehow to be normalized. And that is why international law must be enforced everywhere to protect everyone from power politics, blackmailing, and military attacks. In one sentence, we need to ensure that aggression fails and the international law prevails. Many people are asking about peace. Yes, certainly. But the real questions are what kind of peace? What kind of peace are we talking about? And how to achieve it? Yes, we need peace. And Ukrainian people deserve peace, but not just any peace. We need a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace in line with the United Nations Charter. And the first and obvious steps for peace is for the aggressor to stop its attacks, withdraw its forces from Ukraine. Until then, the European Union will continue to give Ukraine all the support needs to defend its population. And we will do it as long as it takes. The two tracks, supporting Ukraine and looking for peace, go hand in hand. It's not either or, it's both things. And we count on the entire United Nations membership to show its support for these principles in Ukraine and elsewhere. And it's a moment for countries to take a stand and be counted. Meanwhile, the European Union will continue to help the rest of the world to cope with the fallout of Russia's aggression. And that's what we have been doing for 1 year now, and successfully so. Look, food and energy prices are now declining, partly thanks to the solidarity lanes that have been enabling to export 50 million tons of grain from Ukraine. And thanks to the vital Black Sea Grain Initiative brokered by the United Nations. And let me remind you that this Black Sea Grain Initiative is coming up for renewal in mid-March. It needs to be prolonged. It is the food for millions of people around the world what is at stake. Jointly with the European Union member states, we have increased our financial contribution to handle the fallout of the war. We have provided 80 billion to tackle food insecurity until 2024, and half of these resources are going to go to Africa and the Middle East. We know it's not going to be enough, but maybe we can say that there is a strong support for these people who are suffering the shock waves sending by this war of aggression affecting the whole world. It's the war and its consequences which is putting at risk millions of people from the point of view of their livelihoods, facing prices of energy and food that cannot afford. Let's talk about climate. Climate is a test case for multilateralism, but it is also a security issue. Let's look beyond the war in Ukraine. Looking beyond the war in Ukraine, we see the climate crisis as a textbook example of where we need effective multilateral action, but sorry to say, we are not getting it. We need it, we are not getting it. We see unprecedented floods, droughts, and heat waves, and every scientific report concludes that time is running out and that we need far more ambitious climate action. This means accelerating the green transition, but again, in a just way. The green transition will be a just one, or it will not happen. Because those least responsible for causing the problems are the ones that will be most affected for it. And that's why we want to contribute to this just transition. And we are the world's biggest contributor of public climate finance worldwide, with 23 billion euros per year. And as I said, climate change is also a security issue. More and more, the climate and security nexus will dominate the global agenda. And this also means that the Security Council will have to take its responsibilities on that issue. Let me continue discussing on peace and security beyond the war in Ukraine. It's not the only conflict in the world, unhappily. Let me turn to the specifics of the European Union and United Nations cooperation on peace and security. Indeed, all European Union crisis management operations work with United Nations as their partner, and we are proud of it. We are proud of being a strong partner of the United Nations in any crisis management, because our strategic partnership on peacekeeping and crisis management dates back at least 2 decades. And a few weeks ago, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of our first civilian mission, the European Union Police Mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina, 20 years ago. And 20 years later, the EU has 21 civilian and military missions deployed around the world, mobilizing more than 5,000 people working for peace and security. The most recent one includes our military assistance mission in support of Ukraine, obviously, but also in Armenia, and more recently, a military partnership mission in Niger. Let me stress that this mission in Niger demonstrates our willingness to remain engaged in the Sahel. The European Union is not abandoning the Sahel. It's working with its partner as much as they want. And this explicit partnership approach of the vision, built on clear demands from Niger's authorities, aims at increasing its effectiveness in this area, which is one of the most in danger areas in the world. Let's go to the Mediterranean and talk about the naval operation Irini. Irini contributes to the implementation of the United Nations arms embargo. It's the United Nations who has declared the embargo. But the embargo has to be implemented, not just declaring. Someone has to take care that it takes place really effectively on the ground. And Irini is the toughest way of providing support for this arms embargo through inspections at the high seas off the coast of Libya of vessels suspected of breaking the embargo, and Irini remains the only actor doing so. Let's talk about terrorism and how terrorism affects African countries, and how helping African countries in the fight against terrorism is another key priority for the European Union. We have several missions that provide military and civilian support to African countries. The latest example being our training mission in Mozambique. And 5 of our civilian missions include a counter-terrorism mandate. As United Nations peacekeeping marks its 55th anniversary, we must use this opportunity to maximize the impact of United Nations operations. We support the Secretary General's call for a new agenda for peace. We are committed to continue with support to African-led peace support operations and the ongoing discussions to use United Nations assessed contributions for operations authorized by the United Nations Security Council. Regional organizations like the African Union or the Arab Union, together with us, play a key role in preventing and addressing crises. I think that we are well placed as a peace actor by virtue of its wider array of policies and instruments, combining mediation, prevention, diplomatic, security trade, development cooperation, and humanitarian tools. All of us together, all these tools together, allow us to engage through all phases of a conflict if prevention doesn't succeed on avoiding it to happen. We are currently providing such support in 20 conflicts across the world, 20 conflicts across the world, we are there, supporting civilian people and trying to make the situation better, and we will reinforce our capacities on doing so. So it's not only Ukraine. We are paying attention to everything that matters in the world, maintaining our global engagement. Because we know that, yes, war has returned to Europe, but it has not stopped elsewhere. I want to stress that the European Union will remain fully engaged in all crises around the world, financially and politically. Let me end by briefing and addressing some specific cases and regional crises. I want to start with the devastating earthquake in Syria and Turkey, where more than 40,000 victims and hundreds of thousands whose houses are destroyed. There we are providing assistance to both countries in close cooperation with the United Nations. We immediately send medical teams, and we will organize a donors conference next month to finance the reconstruction. At the same time, we were sending also people to fight against the incredibly big fires in Chile. We try to make sure that assistance reaches people in need, both in regime control and in non-regime control parts of northern Syria. Because human beings deserve assistance whatever the regime controls or not controls the territory. In the wake of the earthquake, we have decided to introduce an additional, although time-limited, humanitarian exemption to our sanctions regime in order to make sure that humanitarian aid can reach the Syrian population as quickly as needed and possible. In Afghanistan, don't forget Afghanistan. 2 years ago, Kabul fell, but Afghanistan is still there. And developments have gone from bad to worse because of the Taliban's actions and inactions and the systematic, can I say, gender apartheid that the Afghans are putting in place against women and girls. This gender apartheid in the public life of half of the population is fully unacceptable. So we cannot continue business as usual. But at the same time, we need to avoid punishing Afghan women twice by stopping assistance where it still could be delivered. First, the Taliban punishes them, and then we come and punish them again by cutting the assistance? No. If the assistance can be delivered in full respect of key principles and values, we will continue doing that. I thank the United Nations for its high-level engagement and coordination on the ground, including with us. Sahel, I talk about Sahel, but then I want to approach the situation on Sahel from the point of view of the security situation. And allow me to switch to French, because I know how much important it is for France, the situation in Sahel. Oui. Au Sahel, la situation sécuritaire continue de se détériorer dans un contexte politique chaque fois plus complexe. Mais là aussi, notre volonté d'engagement demeure. Parce que nous savons que quand nous agissons, nous les faisons de manière à répondre à la sécurité, mais aussi à la gouvernance et aux besoins humanitaires. Nous nous sommes adaptés à l'évolution de la dynamique en agissant avec prudence et précaution là où il est nécessaire, au Mali et au Burkina Faso, en rééquilibrant notre action bilatérale avec les partenaires qui sont plus disposés et prêts à travailler avec nous. J'ai déjà cité le Niger, j'y ajoute la Mauritanie. And moving to the Western Balkans, on Bosnia and Herzegovina, I welcome the unanimous extension of EUROFOR Althea executive mandate for another year. Thanks for this decision, because this ensures that Althea can continue to support authorities in maintaining a safe and secure environment for all citizens, and I know how much appreciated this Althea mission by the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The EU candidate status provided a clear signal that the country's future is in the European Union. I met the political leadership last week and addressed the need to deliver on the necessary reforms in order to advance quicker in this path, which is the best way to ensure peace, stability, democracy, freedom, and progress for Bosnia and Herzegovina. I am working on the EU-facilitated Belgrade-Pristina dialogue as coordinator of this dialogue, mandated by the United Nations. On the normalization of relations, we are at a crucial juncture, and I hope that in the next weeks I can offer positive results. The European Union has presented a proposal to the parties that would put the normalization process on a solid, forward-looking track. On Monday, I will have a high-level meeting with the two leaders, Belgrade and Pristina, President of Serbia and Prime Minister of Kosovo, in order to see if this engagement is serious, solid, and presented a clear way for the normalization of relations between the two of them. There are many more countries and crises I could mention, but let me leave it here. I've been talking for too long. Thanks for giving me this opportunity on behalf of the European Union to explain to the world that beyond the Ukrainian war, we remain committed to many crises, many people around the world, doing our best in order to improve the peace and security situation. And I am looking forward, Mr. President, for the comments of the ambassadors, and thank you for your continued cooperation.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Borrell, for his briefing, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Minister for Foreign and European Affairs and Trade of Malta. I begin by welcoming the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Mr. Borrell, to the Security Council today, and by thanking him for his briefing. As a committed supporter of multilateralism, Malta attaches great value to strengthening cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations. They are an integral part of the multilateral system and can contribute in a significant manner through their unique knowledge of their region and its particular circumstances. As a proud member of the European Union, it goes without saying that Malta strongly supports enhanced cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union. Such cooperation has been paying dividends for several years, and we are firm in our belief that it will continue to yield tangible results during 2023 and in the years to come. The principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and the values of the European Union are fully aligned, and we believe that this complementarity makes the two organizations natural partners. The European experiment, born from the ashes of the Second World War, is an example of how multilateralism and regional integration brings peace, stability, prosperity, and growth. The EU's strategic relationship with the United Nations must continue to strengthen the respect for the Charter and international law, including human rights, the rule of law, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. A robust and dynamic collaboration between the EU and the UN will help us contribute to peace and security and to address global challenges that require a global approach in a more effective manner. Towards this end, Malta welcomes the invaluable contribution of the United Nations Secretary-General in presenting a comprehensive vision which outlines the necessary steps in renewing our multilateral approach. Together with the EU, Malta is fully committed to support and effectively contribute to the parallel processes which have been initiated through our Common Agenda report. We truly believe that multilateral and constructive engagement on such initiatives have the potential to bring about the necessary changes to ensure that the United Nations continues to effectively address the most pressing global issues. We are living through challenging times. The EU and its member states have consistently underlined the need to work together towards one common goal, that of upholding the UN Charter and the rules-based order. We have been faced with the reality of our interdependence on a multitude of occasions, and yet we are still unable to come together to address global challenges, including climate. We continue to fail to recognize that a unilateral failure today will translate in collective ramifications for the many during the years to come. In this midst, we have a responsibility to ensure that where possible, regional and international organizations come together to provide that much-needed convergence and collaboration. Regional collaboration and cooperation is indispensable to the proper functioning of our interconnected and globalized world. Through active collaboration, we can make sure that common good is upheld, safeguarded, and pursued. Excellencies, the existing comprehensive UN-EU approach to crisis management, mediation, and peace operations, including the support in different regions, has helped several countries to navigate the difficult path from conflict to peace. We also welcome fruitful UN-EU trilateral cooperation with the African Union to tackle security challenges. As an example, the EU's contribution to ATMIS in Somalia has enabled the mission to effectively carry out its mandate. We reaffirm our support towards the thematic joint efforts that help us to better address contemporary challenges through the implementation of humanitarian principles. The Women's Peace and Security Agenda, Children in Armed Conflict, the Access to Quality Education, and Climate Change Frameworks. In conclusion, Malta's commitment to peace, dialogue, and multilateralism remains stronger than ever. We believe that strengthening cooperation between the UN and the EU will only enhance our ability to prevent and resolve conflict and advance the broader goals and objectives of the UN Charter. I resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Olta Čačka, Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of Albania.
I thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by thanking the High Representative Borrell for the in-depth perspective of the cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union. Your personal and regular participation to this meeting is a testimony of the importance attached to this cooperation, which is indispensable for the international peace and security, as well as for the socio-economic development in the world. In face of the ongoing European and global challenges, there is a need to further strengthen this cooperation to the service of a common agenda, with at its core the strengthening of multilateralism. These two organizations have a particularly crucial role to play on a wide range of issues such as peace and security, meeting humanitarian and development needs in the world, promotion and full respect for human rights, mitigating climate change, as well as to ensure full respect for the international law and strengthen accountability for serious violations of international law. Colleagues, the unprovoked and unjustified military aggression of Russia against Ukraine brought war to Europe at a scale not seen since 1945. By helping Ukraine to defend itself, the European Union and its member states are showing concretely what solidarity means. They are helping a sovereign nation to resist to the brutality of an invasion whose sole aim is to wipe a country out of the world map, subjugate its people to satisfy the desire of an empire. Albania has joined the wide range of policy responses by the EU and its member states to the aggression, aimed at reducing Russia's ability to finance the war on the one hand, and to help the economy and the functionality of Ukraine on the other. We support every form of cooperation between UN and the EU regarding the accountability for the crimes committed in this war. A comprehensive, lasting, and just peace cannot be built upon impunity, and perpetrators should be held accountable for their crimes. Mr. President, the new threats and challenges to the European security architecture need a stronger and more consolidated Europe. The EU enlargement process in the Western Balkans, based on merit, has to speed up, and the progressive reapproachment needs to be more flexible and creative. The more prosperous this region is, the closer it gets to Europe, the more secure the continent will be. From a broader point of view, an upgrade of the European neighborhood policy is needed. The EU and UN should increase their cooperation in regional conflict resolution beyond the support for dialogue and mediation. We commend the cooperation between the EU and the UN in Africa, the European Union's strategic partnership initiatives with the UN in Africa, such as EU-UN Global Terrorism Threat Facility and Global Counter-Terrorism Forum, which have created important synergies between the two organizations. And to end on the particular note, Mr. President, my country is not yet a member of the European Union. It's only a candidate engaged into negotiations to join in the future. We want to join the Union because it is the place where we belong in everything, because we voluntarily align with its policies, we adhere and share its values, and we want to be part of the security and prosperity it has built and expanded. The European Union is today by far the most brilliant project human history has ever known. Whoever has any knowledge of history knows the dramatic European heritage made of conflicts, wars, territorial changes of all kinds, of immense and uninterrupted suffering. Out of this, the European Union has proved convincingly and irrefutably to be the most efficient investment in prevention. Yes, prevention, the weakest point of international cooperation. If we would be looking for any concrete materialization, any true meaning of the word prevention, it is the united Europe. Long-term vision, clear determination, and strong leadership made former belligerents come together, former enemies agree and build their future in cooperation and shared benefits, in freedom and with rules, not to the detriment of some, but to the benefit of all. This is what the EU can offer to the UN and the world, a way to build the future based on the rights of the individuals who come together in collective efforts through the rule of law to benefit from the dividends of democracy. This is why any claims whatsoever that Europe fomented or wants war in its vicinity, endangering itself and the entire continent, are ridiculous, preposterous, and absurd. Europe and those who align with it want peace, work for peace, and project peace. Nothing will change the hard truth. Russia has started the war. Russia may and will end it. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Ms. Shachka, for her statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Kwaku Ampratum Sarpong, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration of Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Mr. Josep Borrell, High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Council, for his briefing and the highlights he gave on the security concerns of the European Union, as well as the strategic and policy approaches the EU is pursuing in response to existing and other emerging threats. The cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union has always been an important and reinforcing factor for our shared aspirations for global peace and security. The partnership framed by Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter affirms the agency of regional bodies in the maintenance of international peace and security. As the continent of Europe faces the worst security and geopolitical crisis in recent times, it is important that the channels of cooperation must be strengthened to help overcome prevailing challenges. Since the Security Council's last consideration of its agenda, item 8 months ago, the security situation in Europe and across the world has rapidly deteriorated, with many conflict situations showing signs of possible escalation. The year-long aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation has spanned new crises and aggravated many others. Apart from humanitarian burden on neighboring countries where millions of Ukrainians have sought refuge from the war, the energy crisis and elevated high cost of living threaten social and political stability in many parts of Europe and beyond. The measures being implemented to protect the European economy from high gas prices and disruptions to energy supply in the region would help to alleviate the burden of the war. We encourage the continued support of the European Union in addressing the humanitarian aspects of the war. Since the onset of the war, the European Union has taken a strong and principled position against the Russian Federation's aggressive acts towards Ukraine, and has been supportive of Ukraine's efforts to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The war has, however, raises for Europe serious considerations about the collective security mechanisms and how they may be strengthened for all. We encourage closer cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union towards the immediate de-escalation of tensions and cessation of hostilities. We encourage the EU as a regional force and a key actor of the collective security of Europe to foster, through dialogue, the peaceful and comprehensive resolution of the conflict in Ukraine. We stress that, of necessity, peace in Ukraine must be founded on international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Mr. President, as the war in Ukraine takes center stage in international affairs, it is vital not to lose sight of other seething situations. We wish, in this regard, to highlight the following. First, averting a renewed war between Armenia and Azerbaijan is critical to avoid the bloodshed and destruction that accompanied the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war and the intermittent border clashes between the two countries. We consider the establishment of a civilian European mission to Armenia in Armenia is an important contribution to stability and building trust between the two sides, and welcome the EU's commitment to support de-escalation and acceleration of key actions, including border demarcation and normalization efforts. In respect of the Cyprus problem, we remain concerned by the current political stalemate. We urge the continued support of the EU for a comprehensive settlement of the dispute on the basis of the Security Council's resolutions. Our combined efforts must at present be geared towards building confidence to open up channels of cooperation between the two Cypriot communities and pave the way for much-needed political dialogue. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the efforts of the UN and the EU through the Security Council's renewal of the mandate of the EUFOR, RTVE, has been an important contributor to maintaining a safe and a secured environment. While progress towards EU integration has been slow, it remains important as a strategic approach in ensuring lasting peace in the country and within the Eurasia region. The support of the European Union in strengthening the African peace and security architecture remains a critical contribution to maintaining long-term peace and security on the continent as well as globally. We welcome ongoing capacity building and technical assistance missions that are helping to adopt responses to the changing security landscape in Africa. We urge in this regard enhanced support for regional-led peace and security initiatives through the provision of adequate, predictable, and sustainable funding, including the use of assessed contributions of the United Nations. In Somalia, for instance, the European Union's continued support for the ATMIS and the effective implementation of the Somalian Transitional Plan remains critical and crucial, even as we note the funding shortfall for the African Transition Mission in Somalia. We recognize the European Union's contribution to humanitarian needs arising in areas of conflict, particularly in Afghanistan, Myanmar, Syria, and Yemen. We also welcome the EU's mobilization in aid of communities affected by the recent earthquakes that struck parts of Syria and Turkey early this month. In closing, let me take this opportunity of this meeting to reiterate the importance of regional and sub-regional organizations for collective security beyond their regional space. While the war in Ukraine is taking place on the continent of Europe, the stalemate it has created in the Security Council is complicating our efforts in Africa to defeat terrorists and violent extremists and achieve the African we want. It is equally not lost on people all over the world that the ramifications of the war in Europe continues to poison relationships among states, undermining our ability as United Nations to address the multiple sustainable development crises we face and respond to the aspirations of our people everywhere. The European Union has shown deep commitment and leadership in deepening cooperation at all levels. For the achievement of global goals, including international peace and security, we encourage the European Union to strive to do more and urge the United Nations to look at further strengthening the cooperation with the EU as we work towards restoring the unity of purpose and effectiveness of the United Nations. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Ampratum Sarpong, for his statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to thank you, Minister Borg, for presiding over this important meeting. I would also like to thank High Representative Borrell for joining us today. Almost 25 years ago, hundreds of Emirati troops deployed to Kosovo to support stabilization efforts there. This initiative complemented the role of the United Nations, the European Union, and other international partners to ensure post-conflict recovery in the Balkans. That deployment illustrates something that I want to stress today. The United Arab Emirates and the EU may not be direct neighbors, but we have many neighbors in common, and our mutual challenges must be addressed collectively. This idea could not be more relevant today. The relationship between the EU and the United Nations is based on a common commitment to multilateralism, the rule of law, and support for the most vulnerable. Today, I would like to address some of the global challenges where cooperation exists and where it could deepen. These include scaling up climate ambition, countering extremism, empowering women and girls, addressing the risks of nuclear proliferation, and promoting peaceful and inclusive solutions to crises around the world. In a world marked by growing fragmentation, the EU's emphasis on connectivity, on establishing strong global trade partnerships, on digital transformation, and on standard setting to promote scientific and technological progress resonates deeply with the UAE. But we recognize that the EU is much more than that. It is also a key geopolitical actor whose commitment to playing a constructive role on so many issues on this Council's agenda we commend. As the war in Ukraine continues, we must redouble efforts to bring it to a just end. We must also ensure that other crises are not ignored, and we welcome the EU's commitment in that regard. However, that needs to be visible in concerted action, not only in word, but in deed. Working with partners in other regions as well. In our region, peace and stability for Libya, Yemen, Syria, Palestine, and Israel must also be achieved, not to mention 9 open conflicts in the African continent. With this in mind, I would like to touch on 3 specific areas of common concern. First, addressing security risks remains key to stability and prosperity. This autumn, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen acknowledged in Manama that it took the EU too long to understand the impact of certain security risks beyond the Middle East. As she said, the world needs a stronger security architecture against the spread of chaos. We could not agree more. The idea that chaos, having gained a foothold somewhere, will not have a ripple effect somewhere else is a mirage. In the end, it will. Emerging risks to our collective stability, such as food insecurity, tech-enabled extremist incitement, and nuclear saber-rattling, all require international cooperation. This also requires addressing protracted conflicts that continue to negatively impact the lives of millions of civilians. In a moment of unprecedented displacement from Syria to the Sahel, there needs to be a change of paradigm in the way we support conflict resolution efforts and manage the flow of those fleeing instability. Promoting sustainable peace and economic opportunities in countries of origin should be a key element in addressing this issue, alongside continued compassion for those most in need. Second, supporting those in need or at risk is a shared priority and should be recognized as that. Together, the UN, the EU, and the UAE have a strong commitment to support those affected by war and natural disasters. This entails ensuring that civilians from Afghanistan to Yemen to Syria receive vital, life-saving aid based on needs and not on politics. The EU is one of the UN's largest donors, providing critical financial and political support to frontline humanitarian efforts. The UAE is host to the world's largest humanitarian hub at the International Humanitarian City, where a pre-positioned bilateral and international assistance, including from the EU, are sent where it's most needed. Most recently, nearly 90 planes full of emergency aid from the UAE were dispatched in response to the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. The UAE is also proud to work with the UN and EU to support women and girls. Without women's empowerment, security and stability will not be sustained. As we witness the reversal of women and girls' rights in almost every region around the world, promoting the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all aspects of public life is key. Third, scaling up climate ambition is an urgent task. Climate mitigation and adaptation efforts must go hand in hand, and the EU is an essential partner to achieve this objective. That work is important to both ensuring sustainable development, especially for developing countries most vulnerable to climate change, as well as to maintaining international peace and security. As host of COP28, the UAE is committed to keeping alive the 1.5-degree global climate target. Climate change is an existential crisis, and we cannot simply confine the 1.5 goal to the dustbin of history. At the same time, we also recognize the importance of securing financing for climate adaptation for the global south, particularly with the increasing frequency and devastation of extreme weather events. Mr. President, the European project was initiated by countries that had just fought a terrible war. They came together with the dedicated ambition to set up a common market for coal and steel. Fast forward 70 years, and they became a union that contributes effectively to so many areas critical for international peace and security. From the perspective of the Gulf today, and indeed the Arab world, this journey from confidence building to political integration and a common agenda remains an inspiring example. We hope we can all reach for that inspiration again today in pursuit of a new peace. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, for convening us today for this important discussion, and I join others in thanking High Representative for his briefing. It is good to see you in person, Your Excellency. This has indeed, as we've heard, been a challenging year for the multilateral system. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine saw the return of war to Europe. The knock-on effects have made it harder to tackle the most pressing global challenges, exacerbated food insecurity, and prolonged the damage wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic. In this challenging context, we welcome the positive role played by the EU and other regional organisations in championing multilateralism and supporting the Security Council on international peace and security. And I'd like to highlight 3 areas in particular. First, we recognise the EU's efforts to address global challenges. The UK is proud of our work alongside the EU to establish energy transition partnerships. The ETP has helped coal-dependent emerging economies make a just energy transition by building on the model pioneered at COP26. And as we've just heard from UAE, we look forward to continuing this work through COP28. We also welcome the EU's considerable support for the UN's Education Cannot Wait Fund. As co-founder of the fund, the UK values this support to high-quality education in emergencies. Second, we recognise the EU's contribution to the UN's work. This includes cooperation with UN peace operations and peace building, for example, in Mali and Somalia, and efforts to promote regional stability. We expect the EU partnership mission to Niger will play a vital role in supporting stability in the Sahel, as you described, Your Excellency. In Europe, we strongly support the EU's role upholding peace and security in the Western Balkans. This includes through the EU-facilitated Serbia-Kosovo dialogue and the ongoing important role of EUFOR. Finally, the UK welcomes the EU's support for Ukraine. The EU has given vital humanitarian assistance and helped tackle global food insecurity by supporting the Black Sea grain deal. As we map out Ukraine's reconstruction, we look forward to working with the EU on preparations for the 2023 Ukraine Recovery Conference, hosted by the UK and Ukraine in London this June. President, the role of the EU in tackling global challenges and assisting the UN's work encapsulates, in these times of crisis, the need for responsible multilateralism. We need an engaged role for regional organisations to address the problems we face and to uphold the principles of the UN Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
De l'organisation de ce
Thank you
débat
for
opportun
organizing this
sur la
timely
coopération
debate
entre
on
les
the
Nations Unies et
cooperation
l'Union
between the
européenne.
United Nations and the European
Je remercie
Union.
également le
I
haut
would also like to
représentant
thank
de
the
l'Union
High
européenne pour les
Representative
affaires
of the European
étrangères et la
Union for
politique de
Foreign Affairs
sécurité
and
et
Security Policy
vice-président de la
and
Commission
Vice
européenne,
President of the
Josep
European
Borrell,
Commission,
de son exposé.
Josep Borrell, for his
Le
presentation.
chapitre 8 de la Charte des Nations
Chapter
Unies
8 of the
souligne
UN Charter
l'importance du
underlines
travail
the
des
importance of the
organisations
work
régionales
of regional
pour le maintien de la
organizations
paix et de la
in
sécurité.
maintaining peace and security.
Grâce à leur expertise, ces
Thanks to
dernières
their
jouent un rôle clé
expertise,
dans la
they play
prévention
a
des
key role
conflits et
in
la
conflict
consolidation de
prevention
la paix.
and peace building.
C'est pourquoi nous saluons la coopération entre
We
les
therefore
Nations
welcome
Unies
the
et les
cooperation
organisations
between the
régionales
UN and
telles que
regional
l'Union africaine,
organizations such as the
l'ASEAN,
African
la
Union,
Ligue des États arabes,
ASEAN, the League of Arab
l'OSCE et
States, the
naturellement
OSCE,
avec l'Union
and of
européenne,
course
notre
with the
voisin
European
immédiat.
Union, our immediate neighbor.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
unis dans
President,
la diversité,
united
cette
in
devise de
diversity,
l'Union européenne
this motto
résonne
of the
avec les
European
valeurs
Union
fondamentales
resonates
des
with
Nations
the
Unies.
fundamental values of the
La
United
Charte nous
Nations.
invite à, je cite,
The Charter
pratiquer la
invites us
tolérance
to, and
et unir nos forces pour
quote,
maintenir la paix
practice
et la
tolerance
sécurité
and join
internationale.
forces to maintain
Cette
international
même
peace and
devise
security.
reflète l'identité de la
This
Suisse,
same motto
un pays
reflects
qui
the
compte 4
identity of
langues nationales,
Switzerland, a
et nous
country with
partageons
4
également
national
avec l'UE
languages.
la vision
We
d'un
also
ordre
share with the
international
EU
fondé sur
the
le droit
vision of an
international
international
et d'un
order based on
multilatéralisme
international
efficace.
law and effective
L'échange
multilateralism.
d'aujourd'hui intervient à un moment où le
Today's
multilatéralisme
exchange
est
comes
mis
at a
sous pression.
time When
Il est
multilateralism is
ainsi
under
d'autant plus
pressure,
pertinent de
it is
rappeler les
therefore all
valeurs
the
qui
more
nous
relevant
unissent.
to recall the values
L'appel
that
du haut
unite us.
représentant à
The High
l'Assemblée générale
Representative's
pour une
appeal to
paix
the
juste et
General
durable en
Assembly
Ukraine
for a just and
traduit
lasting
l'attachement
peace in
de
Ukraine
l'UE et de ses membres
reflects the
à la
commitment of
Charte
the
des Nations
EU
Unies
and its
et au
members to
respect
the
de ses
UN Charter
principes.
and
La
respect for
Suisse
its
partage ce
principles.
même attachement et
Switzerland
rappelle
shares
que le
this
respect de
same
ces
commitment
principes
and
est dans
recalls that
l'intérêt
respect
de
for these
l'Europe et du
principles
monde tout
is in the
entier.
interest of all of Europe and the
L'engagement pour
world
la
as a
paix,
whole.
le développement
The
durable et les
commitment to
droits de
peace,
l'homme
sustainable
orientent les Nations
development and
Unies,
human
l'Union
rights
européenne et la
guide the
politique
United
étrangère de la
Nations,
Suisse.
the European Union, and
Cette base
Swiss foreign
commune se
policy.
traduit par une
This common
collaboration
ground is
étroite
reflected
dans
in
plusieurs
close
contextes et
cooperation in
agendas
various
thématiques.
contexts and
À
thematic
titre
agendas.
d'illustration, j'aimerais
By way of
souligner trois
illustration,
points.
I would like to highlight 3
Premièrement,
points.
nous saluons les efforts conjoints de l'Union
Firstly,
européenne
we
et des
welcome the
Nations
joint
Unies
efforts of
pour
the
la
European
promotion de
Union
la
and the
paix et la
United
prévention
Nations
de
to
conflits
promote
armés
peace
dans le
and
monde.
prevent armed
Nous nous
conflicts in the
réjouissons
world.
de l'importance accordée
We
dans ces
welcome the
efforts au
emphasis
respect du
in
droit
these efforts
international,
on respect
comme
for
par
international
exemple
law,
dans le projet
as for
tripartite
example
de l'Union
in the
africaine,
tripartite
l'UE et les
project
Nations
of the
Unies
African
sur le
Union, the
cadre de
EU,
conformité
and the
aux droits de
UN
l'homme
on the
pour
human
les
rights
opérations
compliance
de maintien
framework
de la
for
paix.
peacekeeping
Dans les
operations.
Balkans occidentaux,
In the
l'UE joue un
Western
rôle
Balkans, the
essentiel
EU
dans la
plays
mise
a
en
key
œuvre des
role
mandats
in
du
the
Conseil de
implementation of
sécurité.
Security Council
Ceci
mandates.
notamment dans le cadre de
This is
l'opération
particularly
EUFOR
true
Althea
of the
à
U4
laquelle la
Althea
Suisse
operation
contribue.
to which
De
Switzerland
façon
contributes.
transversale, l'UE est un partenaire
In a
important
transversal way,
concernant
the
la
EU is
promotion
an
de
important
l'agenda
partner in
femmes, paix et
promoting the Women,
sécurité
Peace and
dans les
Security
différents
agenda
contextes à
in the
l'agenda
different
de ce
contexts
Conseil.
on the agenda of this Council.
Deuxièmement, tout comme l'UE, nous accordons
Secondly,
une
like the
attention
EU, we pay
particulière à la
particular
protection des
attention
civils
to the
ainsi
protection
qu'au
of
respect du droit
civilians
international
and respect for
humanitaire.
international
Nous nous
humanitarian
mobilisons
law.
notamment pour la
In
protection des
particular,
enfants dans
we
les
are making
conflits armés,
efforts for the protection
ainsi que
of
des
children
personnes
in
hors de
armed
combat,
conflicts, as
comme
well
les
as
blessés et les
persons
malades, que
hors de
cela soit en
combat, such
Ukraine,
as the
en Syrie
wounded and
ou
sick,
ailleurs.
whether in
Si
Ukraine,
nous
Syria, or
soutenons la
elsewhere.
justice pour toutes les victimes
We support
et nous nous
justice for
engageons
all
dans la lutte
victims,
contre
and we are
l'impunité,
committed to the
c'est
fight
parce que
against
nous savons
impunity,
qu'il ne peut y
because
avoir
we
de paix
know
durable
that there
sans
can be no
reddition de
lasting
comptes.
peace without accountability.
Troisièmement, la conviction
Thirdly,
que les risques de
the
sécurité
conviction that
doivent être
security
traités
risks
dans un
must
sens
be
plus large
addressed in a
nous
broader
unit
sense
également.
also unites us.
L'insécurité alimentaire
Food
et les conflits
insecurity
sont
and
un cercle
conflict
vicieux
are a
qui
vicious
affecte
circle
de nombreuses
that
régions
affect
du
many
monde,
parts of
que
the
ce soit
world,
au Yémen,
whether
en
in Yemen,
Afghanistan ou dans la
Afghanistan,
Corne de l'Afrique.
or the Horn of
Ceci
Africa.
inclut la lutte contre le changement climatique
This includes the
qui
fight against
exacerbe
climate change,
l'insécurité
which
alimentaire
exacerbates
et peut
food
ainsi avoir des
insecurity
implications
and can thus
pour la
have
paix et la
implications for
sécurité
international
internationale.
peace and security.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr.
la Suisse
President,
partage des fortes convictions avec l'Union
Switzerland
européenne
shares
et les
strong
Nations unies.
convictions with the
Les
European
différends
Union and the
peuvent et
United
doivent
Nations.
être
Disputes
résolus
can
de
and
manière
must be
pacifique.
resolved
Le
peacefully.
dialogue et le respect sont le
Dialogue
meilleur
and
moyen
respect
pour
are
y
the best
parvenir
means to
et
achieve
la
this,
diversité est un
and
moteur de
diversity
paix et
is
de
a driver of
prospérité.
peace and
Nous
prosperity.
continuerons à coopérer
We will
étroitement
continue
avec
to
l'Union
cooperate
européenne
closely with the
et avec les
European
Nations
Union
unies
and with the
au sein
United
et au-delà
Nations,
du Conseil de
both in
sécurité,
the Security
comme dans
Council
la
and
mise en
beyond,
œuvre de notre
as well as in
programme
the
commun.
implementation of our common
Ensemble,
agenda.
nous pouvons
Together,
forger
we
des
can
partenariats
forge global
mondiaux
partnerships
afin de mettre en
to
œuvre
implement
notre devise
our
commune,
common motto,
unis dans la diversité.
united in
Je vous remercie.
diversity. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Mr. President, I would like to welcome His Excellency High Representative Borrell in person to the Security Council and thank him for his detailed and insightful briefing. We also thank Malta's presidency, His Excellency Mr. Bork, for hosting such an important meeting in a timely manner on the day we need a cooperation and solidarity. Mr. President, regional organizations play an indispensable and complementary role in enabling the Security Council to fulfill its primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace and security. Cooperations with regional organizations are built in the UN Charter, and as they enlarge and deepen their mandate, they become more and more important as partner. In this context, Japan values strong cooperation between the EU and the United Nations under the framework of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. We appreciate that the EU has consistently demonstrated its leadership and commitment, garnering vital international attention and support on current issues on the global scale. For example, the EU Global Gateway Initiative is quite important to create sustainable and trustworthy connections to tackle the most pressing global challenges. We welcome the announcement of the huge investment package at the EU and AU summit and the EU and ASEAN summit last year. Japan is more than willing to work with the EU to promote international connectivity as well as green and digital cooperation. Our security cooperation has also deepened. The EU and Japan have conducted more than 25 joint anti-piracy exercises in the Gulf of Aden. Japan and the EU are a global strategic partner to support the three pillars of United Nations, as High Representative mentioned: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, as we share the fundamental values of democracy and freedom. We deeply appreciate the EU and its membership's active participation in the open debate on the rule of law at the Security Council last month, which Japan convened as the president. Mr. President, in the midst of the tumultuous situation, the EU plays an important role for the international community by solid and strong support for Ukraine and other regional partners. We have worked together tirelessly and will work furthermore for international peace and security on various issues other than Ukraine as well, reaffirming an indispensable role of EU as a strong partner of United Nations. I thank Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Japan for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
主席先生，
Mr. President,
欢迎你作为马耳他
I
外长
welcome you
主持今天的会议。
to preside
我也
over
欢
today's
迎
meeting as the
欧盟
Minister
外交与安
for
全政
Foreign
策高
Affairs
级
of
代表
Malta.
博利
I
利先
also
生出席
welcome
今天的
Mr.
会议，并
Borrell,
做
High
通报。
Representative of the European Union for
联合
Foreign
国加
Affairs
强
and
从
Security
区域
Policy
和
to
次区
today's
域组织
meeting
合作
and his
是联合
briefing.
国
The
宪
UN
章的明
strengthening
确
its
要求，
cooperation
也
with
是多
regional
边
and
主义的
sub-regional
重要呈现
organizations
心
is
思。
both a clear provision in the UN
中
Charter
方支
and
持
an
联合国
important
同欧
embodiment
盟
of
根据联合
multilateralism.
国宪
China
章
supports
宗
the
旨和
UN
原则
in
开
its
展合作
cooperation。with the EU
我
in
们乐见
accordance
欧
with the
盟加
purposes and
强
principles
战略
of the
自主，
Charter. We are
在国
pleased
际
to
事务
see the
中发
EU's
挥
greater
更大
strategic
作用，
autonomy is
为维
more
护世界和平与
significant
安
role
全
in international
做出更
affairs
大贡
and
献。
bigger contribution to the maintenance of
中方
global
期
peace
待
and
欧盟
security.
把践
China
行真
expects
正的
the
多边主
EU
义
to
作为优
prioritize
先思
practicing
想。
true multilateralism.
当今世
In
界
today's world,
变乱交
where
织，
transformations are
欧盟作为
intertwined
多
with
边主义的积
conflicts,
极
the
倡导者，
EU, as a vocal
应带
advocate for
头践行真
multilateralism,
正的多
should
边
take
主
the
义，
lead in practicing
遵
true
守联合国宪
multilateralism,
章宗旨和
adhering to the
原则，
purposes and
维
principles of
护
the
与
UN
联合
Charter
国为
and
核心的
maintaining the
多边体
multilateral
系。
system with the UN at
希
its
望
core.
欧盟坚
It
持
is
主
our hope
权平
that
等，
the
不干
EU
涉
will stick
别
to
国
the
内政
principles
原
of
则，
sovereign
尊重各
equality
国
and
自主选
non-interference
择
in
的
other
社会
countries'
制度
internal
和发
affairs,
展道路。
respect the social
在
system
联
and
合国框
development
架
path
下，
each
同
country
各方积极
independently
开展合
chooses
作。
and actively cooperate with all
中
parties
方期
under
待
the
欧
UN
盟把
framework.
营造
China
稳定
expects
的
the
国际
EU
安
to
全
work
环境
towards
作
the
为
goal
努
of
力目标。
creating a stable international
国际安
security
全挑
environment.
战日益
No
复杂，
country can
没有
cope on
国
its
家能
own
够
with
独
the
自应对。
increasingly complex
各
international
国的安
security
全关切
challenges,
相互依
nor
赖，
can one
没有
extricate
国家
itself
可以独
from
善
the
其身。
interdependent security
我们
concerns
希望
of
欧
all
盟在
countries.
开展
It
对
is
外
our
关
hope
系中
that the EU,
平等、
in
重
conducting
视
its
和
foreign
尊重
relations,
各
will
国
give
合理安全
equal
关
attention
切，
to and respect
坚
for the
持用和
legitimate
平方式
security
化解
concerns
纷
of
争，
all countries,
消弭
always
冲突，
resolve disputes
协
and
调推
conflicts
进
peacefully,
全球
and
安全
promote
治
the
理。
global security governance in a coordinated manner.
中方期待欧
China
盟把
expects
助
the
力实现
EU
可
to
持续发
work
展目标
in
作
the
为合
direction
作
of
方向。
facilitating the achievement
当
of the
前
SDGs.
发展
As
中国家
developing
面
countries
临
are
能
currently
源、
facing
粮
difficulties
食、
and
气候
challenges in、
债务
energy,
危机
food,
等
climate,
困难
and the
挑
debt
战。
crisis, among others,
我们期
we
待欧盟利
expect
用
the
自身资
EU
源
to
优势，
leverage
结
its
合发展中国家需要，
advantage in
有
resources
针对
and
性提供
provide
资金和
targeted
技术
financial
支
and
持。
technical support to
我
developing
们欢迎
countries
欧盟与联合
dovetailed
国
with their
凝聚
needs.
更
We
大合
welcome
力，
the EU
对
to
联合
form
国
greater
工作
synergy
形成
with the
有益
UN,
补充，
positively
帮助和支
complement
持
the
发展
UN's
中
work,
国家
help and
实现
support developing
2030年
countries
可
in
持
the
续发展
achievement
目
of the
标。
2030 Agenda and the
主席
SDGs.
先生，
Mr. President,
乌克兰危
the
机是
Ukraine
欧洲安
crisis
全面临
is
的巨
an
大挑战。
enormous challenge to the security
危机
in
的妥
Europe.
善解
The
决
proper settlement of
需
the
要本
crisis
着安全
requires
不可分割原
exploring
则，
how to build a
探讨构
balanced,
建均
effective,
衡、
and
有
sustainable
效、
security
可持续的
architecture
欧
in
洲
Europe
安全构
based
架。
on the principle of
我
indivisible
们再次呼
security.
吁
We
俄罗
again
斯、乌
call
克
on
兰尽
Russia
快
and
停火，
Ukraine to stop
重
fighting
启
and
和平
start
谈
peace
判。
talks the soonest.
欧盟、
In the
北约
meantime,、
美
the
国也要
EU,
同俄罗斯
NATO,
开
and the
展接
US
触对话，
should engage and
实
hold
现欧
dialogue
洲
with
大陆
Russia
共
to
同安
achieve
全。
the common security on the European
中
continent.
方始终
China
站在和
always
平一边，
stands
站
on the
在对话
side
一边。
of peace and dialogue.
中方即将发
It
布
will
关于
soon
政治解
release
决乌
its
克兰危
position
机的
paper
立
on the
场文
political
件，
settlement to the
愿
Ukraine
继续为
crisis
解决乌
and
克兰危
stands
机
ready to
尽
carry
早实
on
现
its
和平，
active and
积极发
constructive
挥
role
建设性
in
作用。
resolving the Ukraine crisis and achieving peace at an early date.
乌克兰危机爆发
1
一
year
年来，
into the Ukraine
各方
crisis,
持续
all
关
parties
注
have been
乌人
following
道
the
局势。
humanitarian situation
我
in
们赞
Ukraine.
赏包括
We
欧
appreciate
盟成员
countries'
国在内
efforts,
的国
including
家
those
为
of
缓
EU
解乌
members,
克兰人
in
道局势所
alleviating
做
the
努力，
humanitarian
特别
situation
是
in
对
Ukraine,
难民、
especially
流离
their
失所者
assistance
等
to
弱势群体给予
disadvantaged
的帮
groups
助。
such as refugees and
希望欧
displaced
盟秉
persons.
持人
It
道
is
精
our
神，
hope that
继续
the
向所有
EU,
受
in
影
the
响的民众
humanitarian
提
spirit,
供
will
帮助，
continue to
尽
extend
可能缓
assistance
解
to all
冲突
affected
和寒冬
population,
对民众
mitigate
生
to the
活造
largest
成的消
extent
极
the
影响，
negative impact of the
防止出
conflict
现
and the
更大
harsh
规模的
winter on
人道危机。
people's lives and prevent
科索
humanitarian
沃
crisis
近
on a
期局
larger
势
scale.
持续
The
升温，
situation in Kosovo
牵动
keeps
巴尔干地
escalating
区稳
recently,
定。
which can
我们
unhinge
希
the
望
stability
欧
on the
盟推
Balkans.
动塞尔维亚和
It is
科
our
索沃
hope
当
that the
局
EU,
开展
in
对话时，
facilitating dialogue
要
between
遵守
Serbia and
安理会
the
第
authority
1214
in Kosovo
号
will
决议
respect
确
the
定的框
framework
架，
established by
避
Council
免外部
Resolution
强加方案。
1244 and avoid
欧盟
imposing
应该
internal
敦促
solutions.
科
The
索沃当
EU
局
should
按照
urge
此
the
前达
authority
成
in
的协
Kosovo
议，
to observe
尽快
previous
推进
agreements,
塞族城市联盟
expedite
的
the
建立，
establishment of the
避免采
Association
取
of
任何
Serb
可
majority
能导致局
municipalities
势升级
and
的单方
avoid
面
any
行动。
unilateral actions that may escalate the situation.
无论国际形势
No
如
matter
何
how
变
the
化，
international
国际社
situation
会都要
evolves,
把
the
帮助非
international
洲实现
community
和
should
平发
always
展
put
作为优
assisting
先重
Africa
点。
in achieving peace and development on the
博雷
front
利先
burner.
生
Mr.
曾在
Borrell,
去年6月
when
安理会发
addressing
言中表
this
示，
council last
希
June,
望欧盟
expressed his hope
把
for
以
the
非洲
EU
方式
to
解决
put
非
to
洲问题
practice
的
the
原则
principle
付
of
诸实
African
践。
solutions
中方
to
对此表
African
示赞赏。
problems, for which China
希
expresses
望欧
its
盟继续
appreciation.
支持
It
非
is
盟
our
集
hope
体安
that
全
the
机制建设，
EU will continue
向
to
非盟
support
和
the
非洲国
establishment
家
of the
在
African
萨赫勒
Union's
地区、
collective
索马里
security
的自主
mechanism,
维和
provide more
与反恐
predictable
行
and
动，
sustainable
提供
financial
更多
support
可
to
预
the
测、
AU and
可持
African
续
countries for
资
their
金支
own
持，
for their
帮
organic
助非洲国家
peacekeeping
实
and
现疫后
counterterrorism
复苏，
operations in the
提升
Sahel
非
and
洲应对
Somalia,
各种风
assist
险挑
African
战的
countries
能
in
力。
post-pandemic recovery, and enhance Africa's capacity
主席
in
先生，
addressing various risks and challenges.
中方
Mr. President,
一贯高度
China
重视发
always
展
pays
同欧
great
盟关系，
attention to
支
building
持
its
欧洲
relations
一体
with
化
the
进程，
EU,
乐
supports the
见非
European
欧洲保持
integration
自主、
process, and is
团
happy
结、
to see
稳
the
定、
sustained
繁荣。
autonomy, unity,
中
stability,
方
and
愿同欧
prosperity
盟
in
不断
Europe.
加强
China
对话
stands
交
ready
流
to
与包容
continuously
互
step up
鉴，
dialogue,
深化在
exchange,
联合
tolerance,
国
and
等
mutual
多边
learning
领
with
域
the
的合
EU,
作，
bring our
维
cooperation
护
at the
并进
UN
行
and other
真正的多
multilateral
边
fora
主
to
义，
greater depth,
共
uphold
同
and
为促
practice
进
true
世界和平
multilateralism,
稳
and
定
jointly make
与
new
繁荣
contributions to
做
the
出新的贡献。
peace, stability, and prosperity
主席
in
先
a
生。
world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President,
прошлый раз, когда
the
в
last
Совете
time at the Security
Безопасности
Council
в июне
in June
2022
of
года
2022,
обсуждались
the last
вопросы
time there was a
взаимодействия
discussion of the question of cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union, we said that thanks to the efforts of Brussels in the relationship between the European Union and the Russian Federation plummeted to rock bottom. As it turned out, there was a whole abyss beneath this rock bottom into which not just our relations continue to plunge, our relations of which there are essentially none, but in and of itself, the United Europe continues to plunge into that abyss. When historians describe the years 2022 to 2023 in the chapter dedicated to the European Union, the words most frequently used will probably be the following:
degradation, helplessness, short-sightedness, and
Немалая
Russophobia.
заслуга в этом не
And this
только
is largely thanks not
индивидуальных
just
европейских лидеров,
to
но и
the efforts of
евробюрократов,
individual
которым
European
относится
leaders, but also European
брифинговавший нас
bureaucrats,
сегодня господин
including
Боррелл.
our briefer today, Mr.
Благодаря вам,
Borrell.
господин
Thanks
Боррелл.
to you, Mr.
За
Borrell.
последний год мы очень
In the
много
past
нового
year, we have learned
узнали
a
о
great
Европе и
deal
истинной
that is
сущности
new
европейской
about
дипломатии.
Europe and the genuine
Узнали,
essence of
например, что
European
Европа —
diplomacy.
это
We learned,
цветущий
for
сад,
example, that Europe is
окруженный
a
джунглями.
prosperous garden
Узнали,
surrounded by
что борьба
jungles.
за мир
We
для
learned that the
европейских
struggle for
дипломатов
peace for
сводится
European
к нарастающим
diplomats
потокам
boils
оружия
down
в зону
to
конфликта,
growing
хотя этот принцип
weapons
прямо
deliverings
запрещено
to a conflict
внутриевропейским
zone, despite the fact
законодательством.
that this in principle is explicitly
Причем
prohibited
часть этих
in internal
поставок,
European
чтобы
legislation,
уже ни у кого не
part of
оставалось
these
сомнений
deliveries to
в
leave, to
миролюбии
cast away
Евросоюза,
any doubt
оплачивается из
about
Европейского
the
фонда
peaceful
мира.
nature and the peace-loving nature of the European
Узнали,
Union.
что свобода
Much of this is
слова в
paid for
ЕС
from the
тождественна
European
запрету
Peace
на
Fund. We
альтернативные
learned
точки
that
зрения.
freedom of speech in the European Union is
Кроме того,
tantamount
вы,
to a
конечно,
ban on
догадывались о
alternative
дремлющей
viewpoints.
в недрах
Moreover, of
Европы
course, we
русофобии,
guessed
но,
at
честно
the
признаться, не представляли себе ее глубины и масштаба.
Russophobia that lie dormant
И она не
in Europe. But
ограничивается
to be
маниакальным
frank,
стремлением
we couldn't
нанести
even
России
imagine
руками
the depth
украинцев
and scope of
поражение на
this,
поле
and
боя.
this was not limited
Она
to the
идет
maniacal
гораздо
desire to
дальше,
vanquish
в угоду
Russia through
самым
Europe, through
примитивным,
Ukrainians on
пещерным
the
русофобам
battlefield. This is
из числа
goes
поляков
far
и
deeper,
прибалтов мы
and
наблюдаем в
this
европейских
is the
столицах
most
и в
primitive
стенах
boorish
европейских институтов
Russophobes
мероприятия на
are
тему того,
seen from
как
among
получше
Poles
расчленить и
and
уничтожить
Balts.
нашу страну.
And in European capitals and in European institutions, there are events carried
На
out
фоне
dedicated
шагов,
to
направленных на отмену
discussions of how
России,
best to
ее
splinter and destroy
культуры,
our country
искусства, спорта,
amid measures
у нас
to
складывается
cancel Russia.
абсолютно
Its
однозначная
culture,
картина о
our
наших
culture,
европейских соседях.
art, athletic
И
achievements.
картина
There
эта
is a
вызывает
completely unambiguous picture
желание
about our
закрыть
European
поплотнее дверь,
neighbors, and the
а
picture
может быть и
gives
забить ее
rise to a
наглухо,
desire to shut
пока
the
эти
door,
мракобесие и
possibly using a
русофобские
deadbolt
шабаш
until
не
these
закончатся.
obscurantist and Russophobic, until this obscurantist
Россия
and
объявлена
Russophobic
главной и,
turmoil
по
comes
сути,
to an end.
единственной угрозой
Russia has been labeled
безопасности
as
Европы.
the main, essentially sole threat
Своего
to
рода
European
табу стали
security.
рассуждения о
Some kind of a
возможности
taboo is
построения
now
общей
discussions
безопасности,
about the possibility
системы
of
безопасности
discussing
с Россией.
a shared security system, common security
Рассуждать
system
можно
with the Russian
только о
Federation.
коллективной безопасности
Discussions are
против
only
России.
allowed about collective security
На любые
against
вопросы
Russia.
в Брюсселе
Any
отвечают, что
issues
Россия виновата
in
в этом
Brussels come up against the answer, the following answer,
Однако
that
эти
Russia
утверждения
itself
разбиваются о простой
is to
факт.
blame.
Именно
And
Россия
yet these
накануне украинского
arguments come up
кризиса
against
последовательно
a
предлагала
simple fact.
Западу
The Russian
подписать
Federation on the eve
договоренности
of the
о
Ukrainian
взаимных
crisis
гарантиях
consistently
безопасности,
proposed that the
продвигала
West sign an
предложение
agreement
о
on mutual
всеобъемлющей
security
и неделимой
assurances,
безопасности
advancing
в
proposals on comprehensive
евроатлантическом
and indivisible
пространстве.
security in the
Все они были
Euro-Atlantic space.
высокомерно
All of
требованы.
these were arrogantly rebuffed.
Зачем они ЕСовскому Брюсселю, который через политику восточного партнерства с 2009 года продвигал абсолютно иную логику
advanced a completely
о
different
необходимости
logic about
разрыва
the need
с
for
Россией, ставил
severing
наших
ties
общих
with
соседей
Russia,
перед выбором
placing
между
our
Россией
shared
и ЕС.
neighbors before a choice,
Логику,
Russia or
которая
the
наглядно
EU, the
проявилась
logic
в
which was
соглашении об
made clear
ассоциации
in
ЕС
agreement on
Украины,
association
ставшей
between the EU and
спусковым
Ukraine,
крючком
which
майданного
triggered
переворота
the Maidan
2014
coup
года
in
и детонатором
2014.
острейшего
And this
украинского
detonated
кризиса,
the
финальную
acute
фазу которого
Ukrainian
мы
crisis, the
сейчас
final
как раз и
phase
наблюдаем.
of which we now are bearing witness
Сегодня мы
to.
прекрасно
Today,
понимаем,
we
что все эти
understand perfectly
басни
well
про
that all of these
добрососедство,
tales about good
партнерство и общее
neighborliness,
пространство были лишь
partnership and
дымовой
a common
завесой
space
для
were a
подготовки
mere
конфронтации с Россией
smokescreen in
руками
the lead up to the
наших общих
confrontation with Russia
соседей.
using our shared neighbors.
Наиболее податливыми оказались
The
Грузия, а
most
затем и
pliant were
Украина,
Georgia and then
выбранные на роль пешек в
Ukraine, who were
геополитическом
chosen as
противостоянии
pawns
с
in the
нашей страной.
geopolitical confrontation with
Если у
our
Тбилиси
country.
хватило
And
ума
if
вовремя
Tbilisi were
остановиться
smart
и
enough
попытаться
to
минимизировать
stop
ущерб,
and
то у
attempt to minimize,
майданного Киева,
mitigate the damage on
пропитанного
time, Maidan in
возрожденным
Kiev
украинским
has been
национализмом,
infiltrated
замешанным
with
на
hostile
неонацизме,
Ukrainian nationalism and
от
possessed
своей
of
новой
neo-Nazism,
холопской роли
they would
попросту
have
снесло
simply
голову.
lost their mind at this new
В итоге мир
sycophantic
сегодня
role.
балансирует на
Ultimately,
грани
today's
самоубийственного
world is
конфликта,
balancing
который ЕС
on
вместе с
the
остальным
verge of a
Западом
suicidal conflict where the
приближается
EU,
семимильными
alongside the
шагами,
rest of the West, is
наращивая поставки
coming
оружия киевскому
toward,
режиму и
by
повышая свою
leaps and
вовлеченность в
bounds,
него.
raising weapons
Кстати говоря,
deliveries to the Kiev
мы
regime
по привычке
and
в таких
increasing its
случаях
complicity in this.
упоминаем
Incidentally
Евросоюз
and
как единую
parenthetically,
Европу,
As
наших
usual,
ближайших
we
естественных
talk about
соседей.
the
Однако это
European
уже,
Union as a
конечно,
single
неправильно.
Europe, our
closest and natural neighbors, but of course this is no longer true. In military and political sense, the European Union before our eyes is losing its own legal standing and becoming a spineless appendage of another military bloc whose true goals, intentions, and masters are well known. On 10 February, a joint declaration of cooperation between the EU and NATO was signed, and essentially this reaffirms the full subordination of the European Union to the goals set out by NATO. The provisions of the document about the secondary nature, or speaking in the language of NATO strategists, the complementary nature vis-a-vis the alliance of Europeans' defense policy, effectively invalidates any European Union claims to be independent in this area. The new level of partnership means for the European Union complete solidarity and confrontational approaches of NATO and dragging it in to play a supporting role in geopolitical ambitions for global domination. The joint declaration is yet another elegy for the Western superior positions. And without this is stated that NATO and the EU is being used in all political, economic, and military means for their own 1 billion citizens, and the rest of the world essentially is viewed by them as a hostile environment which needs to be reformatted using those same instruments. Put succinctly, those same weed-infested jungles that Mr. Borrell sees there. Possibly somebody would object that the EU initially was devised as an economic and not a political bloc, and the strength and appeal of the European Union indeed laid at the economic level, was economic in nature. Probably 1 year ago this was true, but since then the situation changed fundamentally. In the year after that has elapsed, there has been a complete severing of ties with our country. There has been a GDP growth. The GDP of Europe, rather, has been at zero, and inflation has reached staggering record rates, and they're pleased that they have been disconnected from the Russian gas pipeline. The European Union is now mainlining another narcotic, which is costly American liquefied natural gas. For the support of the functioning of the EU economy, the energy aspect in 2022 was 710 billion. In other words, European liberal market economy today is surviving thanks to government subsidies and grants, and the prosperity and economic might of Europe was based first and foremost on cheap Russian energy supplies. As soon as those were no longer in the picture, Europe became an economic colossus with feet of clay and energy use, and they reached beyond the ocean for energy to the glee of Big Brother. Angry tongues say that Washington has sought to begin this conflict to destroy its European competitor. We won't stoop to conspiracy theories, but there's a clear civility before the U.S. in the history of Europe, and this has never been, this is unprecedented. And the European investors are now trying to sweep all these inconvenient facts under the carpet under the rug in order to not make Washington unhappy. And what kind of an independent role of the EU and Europe on the whole can we talk about under these circumstances? And in any event, one thing can be said for sure. After such egregious political economic miscalculations, Europe is unlikely to become a hub for the emerging multipolar world order. This possibility is increasingly remote. Some would say, let's wait, for Europe is first and foremost a union of values, the vaunted freedom, equality, fraternity, democracy, and human rights. And this was always its appeal. Here, the European Union has failed as well, having once taken in the Baltic countries with their Russophobic and apartheid-like relation to their own Russian language speakers, they could have excised this abscess. Instead, they became infected. In Brussels, as long-lost perspective in terms of freedom of media, diluting this into
получившая практическое выражение не только в игнорировании нацистских проявлений на Украине, но и в голосовании против ежегодной резолюции, осуждающей героизацию нацизма. Ну и что же все-таки осталось теперь от ваших ценностей? Каковы достижения? Разве только то, что вы превратили мужчину, женщину в мужчину, а того в небинарную личность, или во что-то среднеродное, а точнее совсем безродное? А традиционные семьи сделали чем-то неприличным? Эти прорывы признаем и тягаться с вами не намерены. Только к нам не надо сблизиться с такими ценностями. Господин председатель, последним и единственным за последние годы документом Совета Безопасности по сотрудничеству с Евросоюзом стало заявление председателя Совета от 14 февраля 2014 года. Тогда члены СБ, в том числе и мы, пребывая в совершенно другой парадигме отношений с ЕС, приветствовали его содействие стабилизации Западных Балкан, Мали, ЦАР, Афганистана и Сирии. Сейчас, спустя 9 лет, текст этого документа выглядит какой-то злой шуткой. Вовлеченность Запада уже принесла лишь нестабильность, экономические проблемы и страдания в эти, да и многие другие регионы. А выделять сегодня Евросоюз из других структур, полностью подмятых под себя США, нет никакого смысла. По странному и почти мистическому совпадению, дата этого заявления действительно во многом отделила старую Европу от новой. Спустя всего неделю после принятия документа ЕСовские представители приняли прямое участие в антиконституционном вооруженном перевороте в Киеве, сделав таким образом ставку с подачи американцев на жесткое противостояние с Россией. Это роковое решение и стало точкой отсчета деградации ЕС, его девальвации до послушного инструмента Вашингтона. Уважаемые коллеги, с учетом откровенной враждебности ЕС в ее нынешнем виде по отношению к России и ее карликового самостоятельного значения, мы вынуждены скептически подходить ко всем проектам, включающим Евросоюз и на площадке ООН. Хотел бы призвать серьезно задуматься о такой переоценке все развивающиеся государства. Вы должны понимать, что за Брюсселем сегодня стоит Вашингтон. А за каждый вложенный им доллар, за каждую сформированную им теорию и политический фонд, вам потом придется расплачиваться независимостью и суверенитетом, а то и столкнуться с прямым вмешательством во внутренние дела. Вспомните попранную Западом независимость Украины, незавидную судьбу этого государства, превращенную в слепую и безвольную пешку чужой игры. Вспомните пылающий до сих пор Ближний Восток и растерзанную Югославию. И не повторяйте
Remember the Middle East whose embers have not died out. Remember Yugoslavia, which was completely destroyed, and don't repeat the mistakes of others. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Mr. President, Mozambique commends Malta for convening this important briefing. We thank the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy for his important and insightful statement. Mr. President, the United Nations Security Council is vested with the primary responsibility for maintaining peace and security, global, regional, and local. Articles 52 to 54, or simply Chapter 8 of the Charter, serve the purpose of guiding us on regional cooperation related to peace and security. The dialogue between the United Nations and the European Union has to be viewed in that perspective. It is an important platform which adds value to our concerted efforts in the promotion of peace and security internationally. Mozambique, as a member of both the African Union and the Southern African Development Community, welcomes our cooperation with the European Union, especially with regard to the support of the African-led programs on the prevention and the resolution of conflicts. In this connection, we registered that since 2004, the European Union has been a contributing partner to the African Union conflict prevention efforts through the African Peace Facility, a fund managed in partnership with the African Union Commission. This has allowed for the financing of the African-led peace support operations, capacity building for the African Union institutions, and the African Union-led conflict prevention initiatives. As a matter of fact, peace, security, and governance have been a long-standing thematic pillar of the European Union-Africa partnership. It is a partnership that we value and that has deepened with the 1989 Fourth Lomé Convention. This collaboration between the European Union and the African Union is, in our view, one of the most effective elements of the broader EU-Africa relationship. The European Peace Facility has since 2021 been enabling the European Union to channel assistance directly to the RECs, regional economic bodies such as SADC, towards regional peace and security support operations. This has allowed for an enhanced flexibility, faster reaction time, and better results for the continent, thus avoiding higher transaction costs and unnecessary delays. Peace and stability in Africa is a matter of utmost importance and of global concern. This justifies the partnership between the European Union and the African Union, a partnership that must be based on a shared interest in tackling the root causes of conflicts, including the promotion of sustainable development. We believe this approach has to be anchored on the African Union's principle, according to which African problems require Africa's solution first. In our understanding, this axiom does not mean the exclusion of the international community from engaging in African problems. Quite the contrary, it calls for deeper cooperation. We believe it was in this spirit that it was referred to by the 6th European Union-African Union Summit held on 17 to 18 February 2022. In this context, we welcome the European Union's support to the African Union's Agenda 2063 implementation, the African Peace and Security Architecture, the African governance architecture and the silencing the guns, a program now extended to the year 2030. The European Union's engagement with the African Union to address security problems covers threats posed by terrorism and violent extremism, illicit circulation of small arms and light weapons, organized crime, among others. It is a program that enjoys our full support. In the Southern African region, Mozambique recognizes the support of the European Union under the implementation of the SADC Strategic Indicative Plan for the organ and its invaluable contribution to the strengthening of the SADC peace and security architecture. Mr. President, the SADC region is in full convergence with the European Union, particularly in programs like the support to peace and security in the SADC region, program designed to strengthen the capacity of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation. We would like to see this support to be further increased. On counterterrorism, we are also encouraged by the EU's support to the SADC's initiatives to operationalize the SADC Regional Counterterrorism Center, launched in February 2022 in Tanzania. The center is expected to play a pivotal role in the prevention of radicalism, violent extremism, and financing of terrorism in the region. We highly praise the European Union in its efforts toward supporting a training mission on counterterrorism to address the ongoing security challenges in Cabo Delgado, a province of our own country, Mozambique. Here again, we would like to see this program to be further strengthened and consolidated. We believe these partnerships further strengthen our capabilities on matters pertaining to crisis management, conflict prevention, counterterrorism, peace building, maritime insecurity, peace operations, among other current security challenges. This is the reason why we welcome our cooperation with the European Union. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je félicite Malte
I congratulate Malta on the initiative of holding this important debate, which highlights the driving role played by regional and sub-regional organizations in drafting and implementing UN programs according to the principles under UN Charter,
Je
Chapter
remercie le
8.
haut représentant
I
de l'Union
thank the
européenne
High
pour les affaires
Representative of
étrangères et
the
la
EU
politique
for
de
Foreign
sécurité
Affairs and Security
pour
Policy
son exposé
for
édifiant
his
sur
enlightening
l'engagement
briefing
international
on
de l'Union
the
européenne.
international commitment of the
Monsieur le
European
Président,
Union. Mr.
les
President,
Nations Unies et l'Union
the United
européenne
Nations
entretiennent
and the
une
EU
dynamique positive
have
d'action
a very
qui ne cesse de prendre de
positive
l'ampleur
interaction
au
which
gré des
has
défis
continued
multiformes
to
à relever
grow
en
as
matière
they
de paix et de
address
sécurité
a number
internationale.
of international peace and security
Il s'agit
challenges.
d'un partenariat de référence
This is a
qui s'aligne
benchmark
sur la
partnership
contribution substantielle de l'Union
which
européenne au fonds
which
et
shows
programme des
the
Nations Unies
substantial
sur la
contribution of the
prévention des
EU
conflits,
to
la
the
lutte
UN
contre le
in
terrorisme
addressing
et l'extrémisme violent,
conflicts, violent
le maintien et la
extremism,
consolidation de la
terrorism,
paix,
maintaining
la
peace and
promotion et
security,
la protection des droits de
promoting and
l'homme,
protecting
l'aide
human rights,
humanitaire, mais
humanitarian
aussi
aid, but
à
also
ses actions propres dans les domaines
the
aussi
EU's
variés que la
own
paix et la
actions
sécurité,
in
la
areas
lutte
such as
contre le
peace and
changement
security,
climatique, la
combating
protection
climate
de la
change,
biodiversité ou la
protecting
lutte contre la pollution.
biodiversity and combating pollution.
L'engagement de l'Union
The
européenne est
commitment of the
particulièrement
EU
important
is
dans
particularly
le cadre du
important
renforcement du
in
multilatéralisme à
bolstering
travers
multilateralism
une réaffirmation
by
et une
reaffirming
consolidation
and
du rôle
consolidating
central
the
des
key
Nations Unies.
role of the United
En matière de
Nations.
prévention des
In
conflits
terms
et de
of conflict
consolidation de la paix,
prevention and peace building,
l'engagement de l'Union
the
européenne a
commitment
pour
of the
principal
European
levier
Union
la Facilité européenne pour la
primarily
paix, qui a vocation
focuses
à
on
contribuer à la paix
ensuring
internationale
peace,
au moyen
contributing
de
to
financement
international peace and
d'opérations de
security by
prévention des conflits
financing
et de
conflict
consolidation
prevention
de paix,
missions and
notamment
peace-building missions,
dans la
in
Corne de l'Afrique,
particular in the
dans la
Horn of
région du
Africa,
Sahel,
in the
en
Sahel,
Afrique centrale et
in
australe,
Central and
mais aussi
Southern Africa,
dans les Balkans
but
occidentaux et en
also in
Ukraine.
the Western Balkans and in
La
Ukraine.
multiplicité des crises
The many
qui sont notamment
crises
exacerbées par des défis
which are
connexes tels
further
que les changements
exacerbated
climatiques,
by
les
issues such
pandémies,
as
le
climate
terrorisme,
change,
le pillage des ressources
pandemics,
naturelles
the
et l'utilisation
pillaging
des
of natural
technologies de
resources,
l'information
terrorism, the
requiert
misuse of
une
ICT. All of this
interopérabilité
requires
entre les Nations Unies et l'Union
interaction
européenne
between
par
the
le biais
United
d'outils
Nations and the
adaptés.
EU through
Ce
adapted
partenariat
tools.
est
This
adossé sur
partnership
un cadre consolidé par un accord
is
de
based
coopération en matière
on
d'opération de paix et de
cooperation
gestion
for
des
peace
crises depuis
and
septembre
managing
2020.
crises since
Ce cadre
September
favorise la
2020.
nécessaire convergence
That
d'action
framework
et
allows their
l'alignement des
actions
priorités de
to
l'Union européenne
align
sur celles des Nations Unies.
The efforts
Le
of the
caractère
EU
de
with the
plus en
United
plus
Nations.
régional des crises
The
a sans doute
increasing
inspiré les
regional
conclusions du rapport
nature
Brahimi
of
sur les
crises
opérations de
following
paix
on the
de
Brahimi
l'ONU en prônant un
report
renforcement
on peace
de la coopération
has
entre les
meant that
Nations
we
Unies et
need
les
growing
organisations
cooperation
régionales.
between regional
La
organizations and
question
the
du
United
partage
Nations.
des
The issue
prérogatives
of
à l'échelle
sharing
globale
prerogatives
dans la
at a
gestion des
global
crises
level in
se
managing
pose avec une
crises
pertinence
is
particulière
increasingly
et met en
relevant
exergue
and
la
highlights
nécessité d'un
the
principe de
need
subsidiarité et d'application d'avantages comparatifs en
to
vue d'une plus grande efficacité.
use our comparative advantage so
Sur le
that we
continent
can be
africain,
more effective.
la
On
coopération
the
entre
African
les Nations
continent,
Unies et
cooperation
l'Union
between the
européenne a
United
pour
Nations and
principal
the
champ
EU
d'expression la
primarily can be
réponse
seen
aux menaces
in
constantes
responding
que
to
font
the
peser les
constant
groupes
threat
extrémistes tels
by
que Boko Haram,
extremist groups
les
such as
ADF
Boko
ou
Haram,
les
the
Shebab,
ADF
dont
or
la
Shabab.
plupart revendiquent
Most
une
of them
filiation avec Daesh.
are affiliated
Le
with
risque
Daesh.
sécuritaire qui en
The
résulte érode
security
sérieusement les fondements des
risks
valeurs
have
partagées, de
undermined
liberté, de dignité
shared
ou de
values of
démocratie sur le
freedom,
continent
democracy,
africain,
and dignity
en
throughout
prenant
the
en
African
tenaille
continent.
les populations
And they hold our peoples
consubstantiellement en proie aux fragilités socio-économiques.
kidnapped, if you will,
Un autre
because
terrain
of our
d'action
increasingly
privilégié
fragile
où la
economies.
coopération entre les Nations Unies et les
Cooperation between
organisations
the United
régionales,
Nations and
notamment avec
regional
l'Union européenne et
organizations, in
l'Union
particular with the
africaine,
European Union and the
est
African Union,
celui de la lutte contre la
is in the
piraterie
area
maritime
of
dans le golfe de Guinée.
combating
Il s'agit là
piracy in the
d'une
Gulf of
menace
Guinea.
sécuritaire et
This is
économique
an
patente
economic and
pour les pays de la
security
région
threat
comme le
which
Gabon,
can be
qui
truly
sont
felt for countries in
exposés
the
aux
region
attaques de
such as
navires,
Gabon. We are
aux activités
exposed
marines
to
illicites,
such
aux
threats,
actes
to
d'enlèvement
illicit
et autres
maritime
sabotages.
activities, to
Le dernier
sabotage, to
rapport du secrétaire
kidnapping.
général sur cette
The most
question
recent SG
souligne
report on
les
this
efforts
issue
conjoints dans
underscores
le
the
cadre de
joint
la
efforts
coopération
in
ONU, Union africaine
cooperation
et Union
between the
européenne, qui
EU,
implique notamment
the
une
EU and the UN with growing presence on the ground, and we are now seeing encouraging, promising signs. The African Union has now had to adopt its own peace and development strategy in Agenda 2063 with our African Peace and Security Initiative, our Architecture for African Governance, or our silencing the weapons program. These ambitious initiatives include a strong mobilization of finances component and joint actions which have prioritized cooperation between the UN, the AU, and the EU, given the convergence of our respective interests. And therefore, we support the need to launch not just an appeal for bolstered bilateral cooperation between the United Nations and the EU, but also cooperation between the EU and the AU, and more broadly, trilateral cooperation between the UN, the EU, and the AU in order to increase coordination as we address cross-cutting concerns in the area of peace and security. Moreover, we call for greater dialogue between the African Union Peace and Security Council and the Political and Security Council of the European Union. Mr. President, partnership between the UN and the EU must be further bolstered so it can be even more effective. It must be based on optimal coordination. In fact, terrorism, transnational crime, and humanitarian crises, natural disasters, these are very complex challenges which are interrelated, and they require the involvement of a number of actors and therefore a rapid exchange of information. Establishing consistent crisis management tools and involving the various actors, these are clearly defined and very necessary, and this approach would lead to the adoption of appropriate policies between regional and sub-regional organizations and the United Nations so that we can address crisis situations effectively. I would focus on the need for us to involve women and children more in conflict prevention mechanisms and peace-building efforts. Their involvement will be essential in ensuring lasting peace. Mr. President, I wish to conclude by reiterating the need to bolster partnerships between the EU and the United Nations, including interregional partnerships. These partnerships are a complementary supportive tool to the United Nations in its main role of maintaining international peace and security. This exemplary partnership has the advantage of being even more flexible when it comes to deployment in various regions, so that the international community's response can be optimal when addressing crises and therefore meet the aspirations of people of the world to safety and to dignity. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Gabon for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We thank Malta for organizing this timely meeting on cooperation between the United Nations and the European Union. And High Representative Borrell, thank you for your informative briefing today. On behalf of the United States, I want to express my deep appreciation for the European Union's invaluable contributions to international peace and security across the globe through its cooperation with the United Nations. The United States and the European Union have also built a strong partnership based on shared values and a common vision. We're steadfast in our commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, principles of territorial integrity, of the political independence of member states, of the rights to individual and collective self-defense. These principles have been put to the test by Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the biggest threat to European security in decades. But as President Biden made clear during his visit to Kyiv this week, Russia grossly underestimated the strength of Ukraine. President Putin thought he could divide the international community, but he was wrong. And the international community will continue to stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. The dream of a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace must not just be an aspiration. It must not be empty words. It must be realized for all of us to enjoy a more secure, more just, and more prosperous world. Since Russia launched its war of aggression, European countries have bolstered their ability to defend themselves, and they have welcomed millions of refugees seeking safety and peace. The United States, our European allies, and EU partners are working hand in hand with UN agencies, other international organizations, and NGOs to mitigate the humanitarian impact of this war, not only in Ukraine, but around the world. Because we all know this war has exacerbated the global food security crisis, and people thousands of miles from Ukraine, especially in countries in the Middle East and Africa that rely on Ukrainian grain, are in dire need. That's why last September, the United States, the European Union, the African Union, and Spain organized the Global Food Security Summit right here at the UN. Since then, more than 100 member states have agreed to act with urgency and at scale to respond to the global food security crisis and avert extreme hunger. That commitment must be backed up with action, with humanitarian assistance, and the United States and members of the European Union are among the largest donors to humanitarian and food security organizations, including the WFP and FAO. We heard from High Representative Borrell. The EU-UN cooperation is not limited to one issue or one area of the world. This partnership is ambitious and it's far-reaching. In Haiti, the EU has joined the UN Basket Fund to help improve security. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the EU's continued commitment to Operation EUFOR Althea has been vital to maintaining peace and security, and the EU-facilitated dialogue remains the best path for normalization between Serbia and Kosovo. In Afghanistan, the United States and the EU have spoken out against the Taliban's dangerous and reckless decrees that seek to erase Afghan women from society and threaten millions of innocent lives. And in Africa, the EU has been a key contributor to security through its cooperation with the UN. Last November, the AU-EU-UN tripartite project on enhancement of AU compliance and accountability framework for peace support operations was launched. This will enhance the AU's capacity to ensure peace support operations are planned and conducted in compliance with international human rights and humanitarian law. And this will build upon AU's Africa Peace and Security architecture. We also welcome the EU's commitment made with the African Union and the UN to promote stability in Somalia, Mali, and the Central African Republic, which will bolster these countries' ability to defend themselves without relying on malign foreign actors. In the Indo-Pacific region, the EU is helping improve maritime security and ensure shared domains are governed lawfully with respect to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Finally, we welcome the EU's invaluable financial support to the United Nations investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh. The UN team is vital to UNITAD's efforts to collect, analyze, and store evidence to prosecute atrocities committed by Daesh. Across every global challenge, the EU is a critical partner to the United Nations and the Security Council, and the world is more peaceful, prosperous, and secure because of this partnership, a partnership that we must continue to strengthen in the months and the years ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Agradezco al ministro de Asuntos Exteriores Europeos y de Comercio de Malta, señor Ian Borg, por convocar a esta reunión. Me sumo a la bienvenida al Alto Representante de la Unión Europea para Asuntos Exteriores y Política de Seguridad, señor Josep Borrell, y le agradezco su exposición informativa. La cooperación entre las Naciones Unidas y las organizaciones regionales va más allá del capítulo 8 de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas sobre acuerdos regionales. Y es indispensable para el sostén de los tres pilares fundamentales de esta organización: el mantenimiento de la paz y la seguridad internacional, la promoción y protección de los derechos humanos y la implementación de la Agenda de Desarrollo Sostenible. La Unión Europea y las Naciones Unidas son socios naturales, unidos por valores y principios y objetivos comunes, que se reflejan en la Carta de la ONU y la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos, así como en el Tratado de Lisboa y la Carta de los Derechos Fundamentales de la Unión Europea, entre otros instrumentos centrales. Mi país reconoce la contribución de la Unión Europea al multilateralismo y la cooperación internacional como eje central de su política exterior y destaca el compromiso de sus miembros en la defensa de un orden internacional basado en el Estado de Derecho y en el derecho internacional. Observamos las importantes contribuciones que la Unión Europea realiza a las misiones de mantenimiento de la paz, en especial por el alto número de oficiales que ayudan a promover la paz y la seguridad en los lugares donde más se necesita. El Ecuador y la Unión Europea compartimos muchas de las prioridades en la Agenda de Paz y Seguridad, entre las que destaco la Agenda sobre Mujeres, Paz y Seguridad, Niños y Conflictos Armados, la protección de civiles, la lucha contra el crimen organizado transnacional y la atención a amenazas emergentes, incluyendo el ciberespacio, la lucha contra el cambio climático y la pérdida de la biodiversidad, la protección de los océanos, entre otros. Al igual que la Unión Europea, el Ecuador está comprometido en defender los principios y propósitos de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas y del derecho internacional. En esa línea, el Ecuador condenó la agresión militar contra Ucrania y ha reiterado su rechazo a cualquier intento de anexión de territorios por la fuerza. Reconozco aquí el rol de apoyo y facilitación por parte de la delegación de la Unión Europea en Nueva York, en el proceso de consultas y negociación de sendas resoluciones adoptadas en el 11º periodo extraordinario de sesiones de emergencia de la Asamblea General. Precisamente esta mañana está siendo considerada para adopción el proyecto de resolución sobre los principios de la Carta de la ONU para una paz general, justa y duradera en Ucrania, también con el copatrocinio y apoyo del Ecuador. Hacemos un llamado a la Unión Europea a intensificar sus esfuerzos para conseguir el diálogo necesario que permita superar los más complejos desafíos que representa este conflicto. De la misma manera, encomiamos los esfuerzos de la Unión Europea en la gestión y el manejo de otros conflictos en Europa. Resaltamos su compromiso con los Balcanes occidentales. Además, apreciamos la contribución que realiza en el marco de las fuerzas de mantenimiento de la paz dirigidas por la Unión Europea, la Operación Altea, contribuyendo al sostenimiento de la paz y la estabilidad en Bosnia y Herzegovina. La cooperación entre la Unión Europea y las Naciones Unidas se extiende, como se ha dicho hoy, más allá de Europa. Valoramos los esfuerzos, en especial el apoyo que brinda a la misión de la Unión Africana en Somalia, la misión multidimensional integrada de estabilización de las Naciones Unidas en Mali y en Sahel. Observamos además su papel en la búsqueda de una solución negociada en la cuestión de Palestina, así como su rol constructivo en el Plan de Acción Integral Conjunto sobre el programa nuclear de Irán. En materia nuclear, al Ecuador le gustaría ver desarrollarse un rol más amplio al interior de la Unión y fuera de ella para acelerar el esfuerzo de las Naciones Unidas por un mundo libre de armas nucleares. Por otra parte, señor presidente, confiamos que continuará fortaleciéndose la cooperación entre la Unión Europea y Latinoamérica. La participación del Alto Representante Borrell el pasado mes de octubre en la tercera reunión de ministros de Relaciones Exteriores, CELAC, Unión Europea, marcó el inicio de una nueva etapa de trabajo conjunto en materia de empoderamiento de las mujeres y las niñas, políticas de género y lucha contra la discriminación, así como en materias de cooperación en la lucha contra la delincuencia transnacional, incluidos el blanqueo de capitales y el tráfico ilícito de drogas. En el ámbito humanitario, subrayamos el rol de la Unión Europea por su respuesta inmediata en apoyo a las víctimas de las tragedias suscitadas en Turquía y Siria, a través de sus programas de ayuda humanitaria y de la movilización de sus equipos de búsqueda y rescate. Lo propio podemos decir en el caso de Haití. Alentamos a la Unión Europea a profundizar su apoyo para los esfuerzos de transición de ese país, que es crucial para asegurar una región y un mundo más seguro. No podemos dejar de subrayar tampoco el rol importante de la Unión Europea en el proceso de paz de Colombia. Señor presidente, hemos constatado que las Naciones Unidas y la Unión Europea tienen capacidades complementarias que al ser coordinadas adecuadamente contribuyen al fortalecimiento del multilateralismo. El Ecuador reitera, por lo tanto, su reconocimiento al papel de la Unión Europea como socio estratégico de las Naciones Unidas y esperamos que la cooperación entre ambas organizaciones siga profundizándose. Y muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let me thank you, Mr. Borg, for convening this meeting, and also to congratulate Malta for their excellent presidency this month. I also take Mr. Josep Borrell, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, for his comprehensive briefing. The complexity of the crisis we face today places enormous pressures on global governance structures. It is high time the UN is reformed to offer effective and more legitimate responses to the multiple challenges to peace and security and the demands of the developing world. Brazil believes that cooperation with regional and sub-regional organizations under the terms of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter is one of the ways multilateralism can be strengthened. We recognize the important role the European Union plays in security issues, including through its contributions to the peace operation in Bosnia and Herzegovina and its engagement in peace efforts in other regions, as well as its support for the sustainability of the Palestinian Authority. Brazil recognizes the EU to redouble its efforts in the search for a negotiated solution to the conflict in Ukraine. We believe that the EU can contribute to adequately addressing the root causes of this conflict, as it has done in the past, and to preventing violence from becoming normalized. We also believe there is a need for reflection on the unforeseen consequences of unilateral sanctions. Experience shows that in most cases, sanctions have a limited effect on actors whose behavior they intend to influence, while invariably harming civilian populations, including in third countries. Close and transparent cooperation between the UN and the EU continues to be very beneficial to the multilateral system, and it can be further strengthened through dialogue with other member states. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Brazil for their statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
je remercie le
I
haut
wish to
représentant
thank
de
the High
l'Union
Representative of
européenne
the
pour les
European
affaires
Union for
étrangères
Foreign
et la
Affairs
politique de
and Security
sécurité, M.
Policy,
Josep
Mr.
Borrell,
Josep
pour sa
Borrell,
déclaration.
for his
Je
statement.
souhaite
I
insister
wish
sur
to
deux
emphasize
aspects.
2 points.
L'Union
The
européenne
European
œuvre
Union
avec les
has
Nations
been
unies
working
pour la
alongside the
primauté du
United
droit sur la
Nations to
force.
ensure the primacy of
L'Union
law
européenne est à
over force.
l'avant-garde
The
pour la
European
défense
Union
de
is
la
at the
Charte des Nations
forefront
unies.
when it comes to
C'est le
defending
cas
the
dans la
Charter of
guerre
the United
d'agression
Nations. This is the
menée depuis
case
une année
in the war of
par la
aggression
Russie
that has
sur
been
le sol
waged over the
européen,
past year by the
au
Russian
mépris de la
Federation on
Charte,
European
du droit
soil, in
international
contempt
et du
of the
principe
Charter of
d'égalité
international
souveraine
law
des
and
États.
of the principle of the sovereign equality
L'UE
of
et ses
states.
États membres sont
The
pleinement
European Union and
mobilisés
member
dans la
states
réponse aux
have been
crises
fully
pour assurer la
galvanized
paix
in
et la
tackling
stabilité
crises
internationale.
to uphold
Les
international
États membres
peace
de
and
l'UE déploient
security. Member states of
collectivement
the
plus de
European
5 000
Union
personnels
have
dans les
collectively
opérations de
deployed
maintien de la
more
paix
than
et leur
5,000
contribution
personnel
finance
in
près d'un
peacekeeping
quart du budget
operations,
total
and
du
their
maintien de la paix.
contributions have
Je ne citerai que
financed more than
quelques
one
exemples.
quarter of the
En
total
Afrique,
budget
je me
for
félicite du lancement
peacekeeping. I will
d'une nouvelle
mention a few
mission de
examples. In
partenariat
Africa, I
militaire au
welcome
Niger.
the official
L'UE
launch
a
of the
aussi
new
montré qu'elle
mission
était un
for
partenaire
the military
fiable de la
partnership in
Somalie
Niger. The
et de
European
l'Union
Union has also
africaine.
demonstrated that it
En
is a
Syrie et en
reliable
Turquie, l'Union
partner
européenne
in
et ses
Somalia
pays
and the
membres
European Union. In Syria and
sont
Turkey, the
mobilisés
European
pour
Union and its
apporter,
member
en
states have
synergie avec les
mobilized
Nations
to
unies,
deliver
une
alongside
aide
the United
d'urgence aux
Nations
populations
emergency
victimes des
assistance
séismes.
to the
Ces efforts viennent s'ajouter
populations
aux
victimized by
27
the
milliards
earthquakes. These efforts are
d'euros
in
d'aide
addition
humanitaire
to
apportés depuis
27
2011 par l'Union
billion
européenne et
euros
ses
of
États
humanitarian
membres
assistance that
aux
has been
Syriens les
delivered
plus
since
vulnérables en
2011
Syrie
by
et
the
dans la
European
région.
Union and member states to the
L'UE et
most
ses États membres
vulnerable
sont
Syrians
mobilisés
in
pour
Syria
défendre
and the
les valeurs
region.
qui sont au
The
cœur des
European Union
Nations
and
unies.
member states have
Il en est
mobilized
ainsi de la
to
défense
defend
des
the
droits de
values that
l'homme
lie at the
et en
heart of the
particulier
United
des droits des
Nations.
femmes.
This includes respect for
C'est le
human
cas en
rights,
Afghanistan,
specifically
où
women's
l'Union
rights.
européenne,
This is the
parmi
case in
les tout premiers
Afghanistan.
bailleurs,
In
a
Afghanistan, where the
maintenu son
European Union
assistance à
is
la population
among the
afghane,
leading donors.
tout en
It has
continuant à
maintained its
exiger des
assistance to
talibans
the
qu'ils reviennent
Afghan
sur les
population
décisions
while
liberticides
continuing
prises
to
à l'encontre
demand
des femmes
that the
et des
Taliban
filles.
rescind their oppressive
L'Union européenne et
decisions
ses États membres sont
eliminating
aussi
freedoms for
mobilisés en
women
faveur
and
de la mise
girls.
en
The
œuvre
European Union
intégrale
and its member
des
states have also
résolutions du Conseil de
mobilized
sécurité sur
for
les
the
agendas
full
femmes,
implementation
paix
of
et
Security
sécurité
Council
et jeunes, paix et
resolutions
sécurité.
on the Women, Peace and Security agenda and the
L'Union européenne
Youth
demeure
Peace and
également un
Security
partenaire
agenda.
essentiel
The
des Nations
European
unies
Union
pour
also
répondre aux
remains
défis
a
du
key partner for the
multilatéralisme de
United
demain.
Nations in tackling
Elle le fait en accompagnant la réforme des
future
Nations unies. Le
multilateralism-related
Conseil de
challenges.
sécurité doit
The
aujourd'hui
European Union has done so by
s'élargir pour gagner
supporting
en
United Nations
représentativité.
reform. The Security Council
Il
should
doit
now be
accueillir de
expanded
nouveaux
to
membres,
become more
permanents
representative.
et
It
non
should
permanents.
welcome new,
Il doit
both
aussi rester
permanent and
capable de jouer
non-permanent
tout son
members, and the
rôle.
Security Council
C'est
should
le
remain
sens de
capable of playing
l'initiative
its full
d'encadrement du
role.
recours au veto
This
en
is
cas
the thrust
d'atrocité
of the
de masse,
initiative to
déjà
limit
soutenue par 106 pays.
use of the veto in the event of mass
Elle le fait
atrocities.
aussi en assurant le
This is
financement de
already
l'ONU.
supported by
Les États membres de l'Union
106
européenne
countries.
sont ainsi
And the
les
European Union
premiers
has done so by
contributeurs au
supporting
budget régulier en
financially the
finançant
United
ainsi
Nations.
près
Member
du
states of the
quart de
European
ce
Union
budget.
are also the leading
Nous
contributors
apportons
to the
également
regular
notre
budget,
contribution aux
financing
priorités du
nearly a
secrétaire
quarter
général
of
des
the
Nations
budget,
unies
24%.
pour
We
affronter les
also
grands défis d'aujourd'hui
we
et
also
de demain.
contributed to the priorities of the
Dans
Secretary
son programme
General
commun, le
in
secrétaire
tackling major
général nous
present
donne
and
une feuille de route
future
pour construire la
challenges.
paix,
In our
créer
common
les
agenda, the
conditions d'un
Secretary
développement
General has
durable
provided
et
a
inclusif,
roadmap
tout en
to
luttant
build
contre les
peace,
effets du
to
changement
create
climatique.
conditions for
L'Union
sustainable and
européenne et
inclusive
ses États
development while
membres
at the same
contribuent aux
time
efforts de la
countering the
communauté
consequences of climate change.
internationale
The
dans ce
European
domaine,
Union and
à
member
travers
states have
notamment des
contributed to the
initiatives
international
visant
community's
à
efforts
accroître
in
la
this area
résilience des
through
États au changement
inter-alia
climatique.
initiatives
Elle contribue
enhance the resilience of states to climate change, and it has also provided support to the least developed countries. You can count on the resolute support of the European Union and its member states to work alongside the United Nations through Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter in all crisis zones and to contribute to the establishment of effective, efficient, and fair multilateralism. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. Okay, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Yes, of course, of course, of course. But brief doesn't
T'étais ma guidance, t'étais si brillante, mais maintenant tu divagues. L'échec est cuisant, je passe à la suivante car j'ai payé trop. Au volume, quand je chante ma peine. J'ai trop voulu que tu sois réel. Au volume, quand on chante notre peine. J'ai trop voulu que tu sois réel. Et pour toi, c'est la même histoire. Tell me something, baby. Tell me why we hesitating. I know there are seasons changing, knowing that we'll always come again. So tell me something, baby. Look at how we're acting lately. Is it just a phase or maybe we're just waiting for the song to end and play it all over again? And if you fuck it up again, I'll be the one holding your hand. 'Cause I am your man. Écoute ma guitare faire l'amour, sa mélodie résonnera toujours, même si nos cœurs battent plus le tambour. Rien ne rimera avec toujours, rien ne rimera jamais avec nous. Cupidon nous passe le bonjour. Tell me something, baby. Tell me why we hesitating. 'Cause I know